Chelsea had always believed that Fairmont Crest's golden lights would one day warm the shadows in her own life. Yet when the envelope slid across her desk on a rain-slick morning, she felt the hush of those same lights collapsing inward, as though the town itself were holding its breath. She ripped through the adhesive seal with trembling fingers, expecting some routine bureaucratic update from the hospital board. But what she found instead was the raw, unvarnished certainty of genetic truth. Madison's DNA matched Bill Hamilton's with undeniable, clinical precision. The numbers glared back like a verdict: 99.9% certainty, an iron chain cinched around every heartbeat Chelsea took. In a single instant, the fragile excitement she had nursed about her tentative romance with Madison became twin storms of dread and devotion. Because wrapped inside that love now lay the power to detonate the Hamilton family, to upend decades of carefully managed public image, to brand Chelsea the interloper who shattered a dynasty for her own secret longing. The hospital corridors outside her office hummed with their usual muffled urgency, but inside her chest the world had stalled. Suspended between the memory of Madison's laugh under fairy-lit terraces and the knowledge that Bill, renowned philanthropist and linchpin of Fairmont Crest's high society, was biologically entwined with the very woman Chelsea had let into her guarded life. Panic bled into calculation as she envisioned the ripple effect. Naomi's measured composure snapping in half, Donnie's simmering resentment exploding into public recrimination, Haley's fragile attempts at reconciliation turning to ash, and Bill himself, the seemingly unassailable patriarch, staring across a dinner table at a daughter he never knew he'd sired. Chelsea considered shredding the report, yet the clinical print felt radioactive. Even shredded fragments could be pieced together, and secrets in Fairmont Crest had a predatory instinct, always hunting the light. She sealed it into a slim black binder, locked it in the bottom drawer, and told herself she would find the right moment, the right strategy, the right language every minute that passed without confession thickened the air around her, until silence itself became a living accomplice. Days blurred into nights. Madison's eyes, alight with the promise of a future Chelsea had barely dared to imagine, searched for an explanation each time Chelsea pulled away, hesitated, drowned in thought. Madison spoke of installing new community outreach programs at the psychiatric hospital, of fundraising galas and scholarship funds, and the possibility that they, together, could renovate the neglected North Wing. Chelsea nodded, smiled, but saw behind every generous plan the faces of the Hamiltons, discovering that their philanthropic empire had another heir apparent. It was Andre Richardson, sleek in designer suits and arrogant as a coiled serpent who will crack the veneer first. Andre had always stalked the hospital's boardroom like a hunter assessing prey, resentful that Bill Hamilton's influence eclipsed his own family's legacy. When he noticed Chelsea guarding her office like a fortress, he intensified his surveillance, bribing an underpaid janitor, rifling trash, hacking email attachments. It took him less than a week to seize a misfiled scan of the DNA report. In the dead space between midnight and dawn, Andre stood before Chelsea with the icy triumph of a man who had discovered dynamite in a powder keg town. He laid the photocopy on her kitchen counter, the Hamilton crest glaring beside forensic metrics. And in a voice as precise as the report's decimals, he offered two choices: help him seize controlling interest in Fairmont Crest Psychiatric, or watch him detonate the secret across every news outlet from the coast to the capital. The hospital was more than a medical institution. It was a nexus of political patronage, pharmaceutical contracts, shadowed research grants, and the delicate pride of a town built on progressive compassion. Control it, and you controlled Fairmont Crest's conscience. Chelsea's refusal died soundlessly in her throat because she could already envision Andre's headline, "Hamilton heiress hidden in plain sight." She pictured Naomi's steely gaze cracking, Bill's authoritative tone turning brittle, Madison's confusion curdling into devastation as she realized Chelsea had withheld the truth. Andre leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of imported whiskey, and he promised he would be patient, but only until the next board vote. If Chelsea wanted the secret safe, she would use her voting block to tip the balance. For nights she wandered the cliffside promenade, wine lashing hair across tear-stung cheeks, replaying every second she had spent with Madison, the first hesitant smile over shared espresso. Late night walks where they whispered childhood scars, the electric moment their hands intertwined like puzzle pieces finding purchase. She asked herself whether a love begun in innocence could survive a revelation rooted in inadvertent betrayal. Could Madison forgive her for hiding something so intrinsic? Would Bill disown Madison or embrace her? Would Chelsea's own name become synonymous with scandal? Each scenario twisted into the next until dawn burned pink against the sea and she realized she had looped the same mile of coastline for hours. At the hospital board meeting, Andre sat poised at the mahogany table, tapping his silver pen exactly 3 times whenever he caught Chelsea's eye, a silent metronome counting down to exposure. The vote concerned a sweeping reorganization, privatize critical care wards, redirect research grants, and install Andre as executive director. It would convert compassionate care into revenue streams, patients into line items, and leave the most vulnerable at the mercy of cost-benefit spreadsheets. Chelsea's heart pounded like a fist against her ribs. She held the tie-breaking authority. Across from her, Bill smiled, confident she would defend their shared vision of humane treatment. Madison, seated beside him, squeezed Chelsea's elbow in silent gratitude, unaware that a genetic bond shimmered between them like invisible static. When the ballots were tallied, Chelsea's vote etched a razor across the room. Abstention. Gasps erupted. Andre's lips curved at the edges, sensing victory. The tie defaulted to the motion's passage. The hospital would fall under Andre's reign. Chelsea staggered out before anyone could interpret her betrayal, stumbling into a courtyard blooming with late-season jasmine whose sweet scent now smelled like poison. She expected Madison to hunt her down, to demand answers. But it was Bill who found her first, confusion etched deeply into every line of his face. Before he could speak, Andre emerged behind him, brandishing the photocopy like a royal decree. Chelsea watched the color drain from Bill's cheeks as he scanned the statistics and realized the impossible. Madison, his longtime protege and the woman he had shepherded through medical school, shared his own blood. In the space of a heartbeat, the father he never knew he was stared at the lover he could hardly recognize. Chelsea tried to speak, to explain the chronology, the accident, the layers of ethical quagmire that had spiraled beyond control, but words dissolved on her tongue. Madison arrived at the courtyard's edge, saw the report clutched in Bill's shaking hand, and registered what it meant before anyone spoke. Her knees buckled. Chelsea lunged to catch her. Bill reached to, but Madison recoiled from them both, as though the ground itself had split. The coming days blurred into a feverish theater of press leaks, shareholder revolts, and social media storms. Andre's provisional control of the hospital galvanized immediate cost cuts, patient protests, and investigative journalists sniffing for corruption. Bill attempted to halt the reorganization through emergency injunction, yet every legal avenue bogged down under public fascination with his newly revealed paternity scandal. Naomi's dignity shattered in televised interviews where reporters dissected her marriage, insinuating decades-old infidelities. Donnie descended into bitter tirades, accusing Madison of scheming all along. Madison disappeared from view, checked herself into a private wing of the very hospital now under Andre's ruthless renovation, citing exhaustion but craving invisibility. In the sterile hush of that ward, Chelsea sat by Madison's bedside, confessing everything: the chance envelope, the paralysis, the blackmail, the vote she could neither justify nor undo. Madison's silence cut deeper than reproach. Yet as days stretched into nights, a flicker of empathy emerged. Madison, trained in trauma counseling, understood that fear can be as dominant as love and that Chelsea had been cornered between moral absolutes. Outside, the hospital staff organized strikes. Psychiatric evaluations were fast-tracked into early discharges to minimize overhead. Pharmaceutical reps salivated over new experimental trial slots. Andre maneuvered through the turmoil with Machiavellian poise, but beneath his veneer he recognized that his leverage over Chelsea had expired the moment the secret went public. Still, he could not relinquish victory. One bill confronted him in the executive suite, demanding resignation and restitution. Andre countered with a threat to release intake videos showing overstressed nurses breaking protocol proof. He claimed that the Hamilton legacy was built on systemic negligence. Bill's fists clenched, but he offered a compromise: step down quietly and he would shepherd Andre toward a dignified exit, preserving what remained of both their reputations. Andre refused and doubled security. Meanwhile, Chelsea, refusing to watch the institution rot, rallied an unlikely coalition: dispossessed nurses, community advocates, even pharmaceutical whistleblowers who had been marginalized by Andre's profit-driven agenda. They drafted evidence of corruption, financial misappropriation, human rights violations. In clandestine meetings, they prepared a class action suit, but Chelsea feared endless litigation would bleed patients dry before reforms arrived. She proposed something bolder: exposing Andre's offshore accounts and black market drug trials live on the town hall's public access broadcast, bypassing courts and igniting public outrage severe enough to force regulators and investors to cut ties instantly. As the town hall convened, Andre misunderstood this as a perfunctory community relations panel and arrived confident. But the moment cameras rolled, Chelsea revealed transaction ledgers. Subpoena ready. Bill, having reconciled with the revelation of his fatherhood and determined to redeem his failures, corroborated her data, announcing the launch of an independent trust to rescue the hospital from private profiteering. The audience erupted, reporters swarmed, and Andre, cornered, tried to flee but was intercepted by federal investigators tipped off by Chelsea mere hours earlier. Sirens wailed outside. In those chaotic minutes, Chelsea locked eyes with Madison, who stood in the aisle wearing a simple navy blazer, no longer hiding behind exhaustion but radiating arduous resolve. Tears shimmered, yet Madison's voice, when it finally found Chelsea backstage, was steady. She forgave the silence, understood the terror, but warned that trust, once scorched, regenerates only through relentless honesty. Chelsea vowed transparency henceforth, not just with Madison, but with the town that had witnessed her collapse and resurgence. In the months that followed, Fairmont Crest Psychiatric underwent a rebirth funded by Bill's trust, governed by a diverse board that included former patients and frontline nurses. Chelsea declined an executive title, choosing instead to lead community outreach where policy met lived experience. Madison pioneered trauma-informed care units and confronted the complexity of embracing Bill as father while mourning the simplicity that had gone before. The scandal faded into institutional folklore, but its lessons calcified in every renovated corridor. Secrets may birth empires of power, but only truth bird raw. Incandescent can tear those empires down and build something that might one day hold against the storms that follow.